This homeless person had no way of getting in touch with anyone from his old life, including his family and friends. But you're about to hear how lucky he was that a police officer helped him get a second chance. After a while, the homeless person was hurt, saying, "Who would have thought something like this could happen to anyone, let alone me?" The guy who was living on the streets was born in 1950. His mother decided to give him up for adoption when he was 2 years old, and he ended up living with a couple in San Leandro, California. He was an average high school student in the marching band and had a B average. Overall, he was adopted, but he never got close to his family, and he and his siblings had a hard time to get along. Even though the rest of the family thought of him as other, he was very close to his foster mother. She was his main source of emotional and physical support. Sadly, this wasn't enough because he could never keep a job and could barely make ends meet. After a while, the couple who had taken him in was no longer around his immediate and extended family members, who didn't like him, didn't waste any time cutting off old ties with him and turning their backs on him. He had also lost touch with his childhood friends who still live in San Leandro. So he was left to take care of himself. He got a job as a truck driver and was mostly happy with it, but he ran into a problem that wouldn't have stopped a truck. He felt very bad about this. This kind of problem could have ended his life, and it did. He was now homeless and living by himself. Because of the accident, he could no longer drive a car. He had to use a wheelchair for more than a year before he was able to switch to crutches. He went to other places to find a job, but he couldn't because of his disabilities due to his health problems. After some time, he got jobs in manufacturing, the food industry, even at the Department of Motor Vehicles. Unfortunately, he was fired from these jobs because of his disability. From that point on, things just got worse and worse. Meet Mike Myers. Myers couldn't pay for himself and didn't have any family or friends he could ask help for, so when he lost his job, he had no choice but to live on the streets. He tried to make money by playing the guitar and begging on the street corners, but neither worked. Myers turned 67 in 2017, and up until that point, he'd spent his whole adult life living on the streets. He was used to living that way, so he forgot everything about his old life and lost hope. The sad fact is that he is just one of the thousands of people who lived their lives. The Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development said there would be 550,000 homeless people in the United States alone. 25% of all of homeless people in the United States live in the state of California. After talking to one person, he started questioning his thoughts. Myers had no place to live, so he had to beg and play his guitar on the side of the road to make some money. Myers was put in a situation where he had no choice but to do what County Deputy Sheriff Jacob Solowit told him to do. He had to come up with a way to make money. The deputy didn't know at the time that he would change this man's life forever. He only knew that he was homeless, played guitar, and asked for money on Foothill Boulevard. Even though the deputy had met Myers before, he and Myers never talked to each other. On one occasion, the deputy decided to give a citation to Myers, but he was surprised when Myers couldn't show any form of ID. He asked Myers some questions, and soon the two of them were deep in a conversation about his life. Myers didn't have any ID, he couldn't get a social security or help. Myers couldn't get an identification card, since he did not have any paperwork onto his name, since you need a valid ID to get a government assistance. He could not obtain any. This made the deputy feel a great deal of sadness. As a result, he promised Myers that he would do all in his power to help Myers get off the street. Myers' mood improved as a result, and he could express how appreciative he was if that someone was there to assist him. The first step that the deputy took was in his research was going in the same direction as Myers, as he was interested in discovering Myers' striding history. He contacted the DMV. There was no trace of him at the business, even though he had previously worked there. It was pointless. Years of time in order to get government issues did. He would be required to provide both his birth certificate and evidence. Now he resides in the state of California. The deputy posted the following questions: but how is he supposed to produce evidence of residency if he doesn't even have a place to live? On the other hand, he had no intention of giving up at any point, so he needed assistance from another person. Myers at the Department of Motor Vehicle had just met for the first time a month earlier, but he was eventually able to get his driver's license after providing them with all the necessary documentation. During his inquiry, the deputy uncovered information that would forever alter the course of his new friend's life. This revelation could not be reversed. when the deputy learned that the name Myers had been altered, he was taken aback by the news. At the time of his birth he was given the name Gordon Michael Oakley. He did not really go by that moniker McMyers. Even Myers was taken aback by this information given that he was completely unaware of it. When a local news station learned about the event, it told the tale of a peculiar connection that enticed a great number of people to back the cars, because of the success of this scheme. A private investigator by the name Mark Harkins decided to donate his services. Mark Harkins had spent a significant amount of time working in the area of investigation before becoming interested in the Myers case. He contacted the deputy admiral and inquired about the possibility of the two of them assisting him in locating his biological family. In point of fact, this bestowed upon Myers a revitalized feeling of optimism. The circumstances surrounding Myers were not unique in any way. A significant number of homeless persons have been estranged from their families due to factors such as mental illness, a lack of access to technology, or the inability to utilize it, or simply because they are embarrassed by their situation. They vanished into thin air and no one can recall that they were a part of history. Mark Harkins returned to work almost as soon as he finished his conversation with the deputy. At Myers, because he could only go off of what was written on the birth certificate, his task ended up being more difficult than it should have been. He had to make his way to the courts to get further details. On the other hand, this was not the case throughout the decade of the 1950s. People interested in seeing the documents had to go through a large number of other papers to find them. Since they hadn't been digitized yet, Mark Harkins was able to locate an old case file for a lady whose name was Murray Pauline Oakley. After doing a substantial amount of investigation, she read Willie Albert Oakley in Reno, and the couple quickly welcomed the son into the world. Gordon Michael Oakley, or Mike Myers. Although he was mostly often referred as Mike Myers in the years to come, Mike Myers would become a well-known musician. Sadly, after a few short years of being married, the couple made the decision to end their marriage and their relationship. Although Harkins learned that the father had passed away, he did not let this deter him from looking for the baby's original mother and attempting to learn the reason she had placed her child for adoption. When Harkins called the number, he was taken aback to learn that the former Murray Pauline Oakley, who was then 85 years old and had lived only a few miles away, now went by her middle name Pauline, and that she had served in WW2. After the first encounter, the two individuals met together. Harkins engaged in a lengthy conversation about her kid. She was taken aback and interested in how it was doing. Myers was adopted by a family that could better provide for his needs after being given away at the Catholic parish. She felt that certain that this decision was right, despite the fact that she had some reservations about it. Myers and his mother were able to communicate with one another thanks to Harkins, who arranged a phone conversation between them. On the other hand, Harkins would take it to an even greater extent. A few weeks later, when it was finally time for Myers to fly to his mother's home for the first time, Harkins the deputy accompanied him on the trip, in spite of the fact that he had never met her and that she was for all intents and purposes a complete stranger to him. When they arrived at the residence, Myers' mother greeted him at the front door and invited him to come on inside. They clung to one another in a tight embrace for a considerable amount of time until they both burst into tears. Over 60 years had passed and not one of them had the slightest incline that this day would ever arrive. Myers discussed the experience of growing up with his adopted family, which included some of his most cherished childhood memories. In addition to this, he discussed the occasions in his life when things began to turn around for the better. When his mother found out about all of the son's issues, it caused her a great deal of emotional distress. She sought solace in the thoughts that he was making progress in his life throughout the years. But when she discovered that this wasn't the case, it caused her a great deal of pain. On the other hand, they had reconciled their differences, so it was a positive development.